we're going to jump right into the podcast. And the first thing we're talking about today is Tenet. I know I mentioned this in the last podcast. I said that I would be letting you guys know my thoughts. And I am fully prepared to do that, but in a different way than I expected. Because if we want to talk about Christopher Nolan's new movie, Tenet, we have to say, anyone who claims to know what they're talking about when they're talking about this movie doesn't know what they're talking about. That's how I feel about it anyway. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I feel like after watching the movie, I walked out of the theater and my entire reaction while I was watching the movie was I was just like, I don't know what's going on, but it looks really cool. And that was pretty much the entirety of the movie. It looked really cool. It felt really good. It was an incredibly enjoyable and immersive theater experience. But I didn't know what was going on. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I sort of did. I'm exaggerating just a bit. But it is an incredibly confusing movie. And so when I say that I didn't know what was going on, I don't mean that I'm an idiot. I'm not stupid, okay? I promise. I promise. But it's just an incredibly confusing movie, and Christopher Nolan never really explains himself, and that is a tentpole of his style. So I'm not going to complain about that. I'm actually going to praise it. I have to say, I really love Christopher Nolan. He's not like my favorite director of all time, but I don't get all the criticism. You know, I've seen a few reviews out there that criticize his overall style, his loud, immersive style that is full of gigantic set pieces, imaginative plots, really deep, like that meme with the guy trying to do the math in his head, they're really hard plots to wrap your brain around sometimes, and they're clearly meant to be that way. He doesn't always give you all the information you need to truly understand what's going on. And I think that's okay. I've seen some people complain. They're like, oh yeah, another Christopher Nolan movie. The soundtrack goes, Bwah! And a bunch of people talk and you can't really understand what they're saying because the sound mixing is weird and blah, 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 blah. And all I have to say is no. That's not the case. That's not the case. You know what? Every time that Christopher Nolan soundtrack goes, Bwah! I love it. It sounds good. I love the Bwah! So deal with it. I love it. If you don't love the Bwah! Then, oh well. Turn off this podcast. If you don't love Blahs, turn off the podcast because I love Blahs. And let me explain why. The first thing that I love about this film is that not getting into any of the story or just the acting or the characters or any of the really directing aspects. Obviously, the visuals are great, but what really makes this movie so immersive is the soundtrack. The sound editing is something that I love, and I know it gets criticism. So to each their own. I mean, you're wrong if you disagree with me, but to each their own, you know what I mean? But it's something that I really enjoy. And I'm so glad that I went and saw this movie in the theaters because I truly think you are doing a disservice to yourself and society and maybe even committing a mortal sin by not seeing this movie in theaters. If you watch this on an iPhone, on a laptop, or on your crappy home TV that's 32 inches with the stock Best Buy speakers, you're doing an injustice to the world. So the first thing you notice right off the bat when you jump into this movie is that it's so immersive. The opening set piece, I won't get into any spoilers, but the opening set piece is pretty cool. It's pretty creative. It's pretty important to the movie. And the best part about it is that you get into that theater, at least the theater that I was at, and they just blow your eardrums out. And now I know some people might not like that, but if you don't like that, that's your problem. I love that. I want my eardrums blown out when I go to the theater. That's just me. I want to get my eardrums destroyed. I want to need surgery by the time that I walk out. And Christopher Nolan does exactly that with Tenet. You get in there, and obviously the opening set piece is action-packed. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, but every time that a character is punched, every time a gun goes off, even I know people talk about the the sound mixing of the vocals, the talking that the characters do can be hard to hear at times. They say things like that because it is a little bit lower. You do have to listen a little bit harder, but I don't really agree with that. I felt like I could hear pretty much all of the necessary dialogue in the movie. So I think that if you can't hear the dialogue, then maybe you need to get your ears checked or you need to pay attention a little harder. Okay. Tough luck. Anyway, I just love, not because it's just loud, but it's so immersive. And, Christopher Nolan utilizes so many crazy, weird, random seeming noises that are mixed in with what I think is a great soundtrack, great music, but a lot of like just odd noises and screeches and hums and type of noises. So that's something that I truly love. I think it's really immersive, and it's such a tentpole of Christopher Nolan's style, and in Tenet it is on display in full. I think Tenet might be one of my favorite, probably like top 2. I don't know. I don't really rank Christopher Nolan movies, but as I'm doing it off the top of my head, it's top 2 in my Nolan movies maybe. But it's hard to say because I don't know if I rank the Batman movies as Nolan movies, even though they are Nolan movies. But then again, his first 2 movies were so good. I mean, you can't even forget about The Prestige. That's so hard. But yeah, I'd say Tenet is top 3 for me. And I say that even though I walked out of the theater kind of wondering if I really truly understood what I just saw. And I think that is almost what elevates my opinion of the movie to an extent, because despite the fact that I was confused for a lot of the movie, despite the fact that I felt like I might have missed something for a lot of the movie, I still enjoyed it immensely. Just the experience of being in the theater and watching it on the screen was just so fulfilling to me. And that's my personal opinion. But as I said earlier, if you don't agree, then you're wrong. So moving on. It's not a character-heavy movie. Not a lot of Christopher Nolan's films are, and you could say that's a criticism, and I normally would criticize that if it was in a different book or a different movie that didn't do as much of what Christopher Nolan does as well as he does. But what really saves Christopher Nolan and allows him to do pretty much whatever he wants is that the things that he does do well, he does so above and beyond better than anyone else in the industry that you don't even feel like it's necessary to have other elements that you would expect or want out of other stories. So I'll try to explain that. Christopher Nolan tends to rely on pretty much the charisma of his actors over the actual plot and story and development of the characters themselves. Now, the movie's full of plot, but they're not always that relevant to the character themselves. There's not always a ton of humanity, at least on the surface, to the characters and what they're trying to accomplish. It's very easy to get wrapped up in the complex plots, the world-ending plots, the whatever movie it is, whoever's trying to end the world or blow up a planet or whatever war is going on. It's very easy to get wrapped up in those and overlook the human elements of the stories. They are there, but they're definitely downplayed. And in Tenet, just like in a lot of his other films, he does rely on the charisma of his actors to really carry the characters forward. And I don't really mind that because he does a really good job of picking the actors out. I think Robert Pattinson is fantastic, as well as John David Washington. I think they both kill it in this movie. And the thing is, it's not like an Oscar acting movie. It's not an award-winning movie based on the acting alone. The performances are great in my opinion, but they're subtle. They're subtle and they're embodiments of these characters that you don't ever really get to know. And that's one of the things that I really love about it is that the characters, they actually, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, I don't think you ever learn the name of the protagonist, the John David Washington who you see in the trailers. You never even learn his name. And I think that's important because I think the whole point of that is that his name was not important. Who he is not important because who he is embodied by the movie and what you learn by the end of the movie. You don't need to know anything about him before that. You don't need to know about his relationships before that. I'm not even sure that you need him to develop much at all over the course of the film, because I'm not sure that he does. I'm not sure any of the characters really develop over the course of the film. And normally that would be a criticism that I would have of a story. But in this case, it's not. Now, Tenet is a film that is so complex and confusing, and there's so much to say about it that I could go on for this entire podcast just getting into all the things that I love or question or theories about the film. But I'm going to try to keep it a little bit quicker so that you're not wasting your entire day just listening to me gush about the film. Hopefully there's a little more value than just gushing. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that made it a lot better, I wish I could just go see it. I may go see it in the theater again, honestly, because I really did enjoy it that much. And I think it would benefit. It seems like the type of film that would benefit from a second viewing a lot. But obviously I went home and I thought about it. I had to think about it. I had to talk about it with the people that I went to see the film with to really gather my thoughts and figure out where I would truly land, where I would truly rank the movie, what I would rate it, and so on. And one of the things that helps that out is going on YouTube and looking at all the theory videos and all the Tenet ending explained videos that you find on YouTube, and so on and so forth. I watched all the videos that I could find to try and understand the plot better. I checked out the theories that may or may not be true, but I also mostly focused on just trying to get as many different people to explain in as many different ways as possible what actually happened in the film. Because I feel like even after figuring out what happened in the film, you still don't really understand it. Because as you can tell from the trailers, this isn't giving anything away to say that there is an element of time inversion. You know, you see people going backwards through time while other people are going forwards through time. And it's really, really confusing. Even when you understand what's going on, it's still really confusing. There's a really philosophical edge to the kind of message of the movie. And I have to admit, I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. I do love the philosophical edge, leave you with a question. One of my favorite things about Nolan is that he doesn't really like to explain himself. And that's my big question to you, I guess, is does Christopher Nolan have to explain himself? I really don't think he does. And I think that's where some people get caught up. I think they often get caught up in wanting him to explain himself or feeling like he owes an explanation to the audience. And I really don't. I don't feel like he does. And I think that's what elevates his work to an extent. I think it elevates his work that he doesn't explain himself, and he leaves a lot to be desired, but it's in a good way. So if you can't tell already, if I haven't stated enough, I really enjoyed this movie. What really sends it over the top is just how immersive it is. As always with Christopher Nolan films, it's full of set pieces that are both impressive just in visual, but also incredibly creative. The plot is, it's one thing that I have to give to them too, because you could criticize some elements of the plot or the way it was executed. There may be holes some places that I haven't poked yet, but I always tend to give extra credit as well to a director who is willing to take the chance and take on a topic as hard and complex and big as something like Tenet does. It kind of reminds me of Inception in that vein, where he's taking on something that is going to be really hard to pull off. And so I personally feel like he pulled it off really well. But even if he didn't pull it off perfectly in everyone's mind, I just have to give him the kudos, the brownie points, whatever it is, because it's just so hard. It's so hard to come as a director, as someone who's never directed and I would never direct anything. I don't even really understand the inner workings of directing because I'm an idiot. But I just imagine it being, and based on what other directors have achieved, it is incredibly hard to do anything like what Christopher Nolan has done, especially with the scope of what he's done. So yeah, kudos to Nolan. I love years when Nolan releases a film because I feel like he really does set the bar for other people to come. So I have rambled on that for long enough. I feel like I could go on and on and on because there's so much to think about, so much to discuss. But without getting into spoilers, there's really not much more that I can say. So the sound is great. It's immersive. It's thought-provoking. It's got great performances across the board. And something I wanted to lead directly into that relates to Tenet on some level is